The Rigor Relevance framework, developed by the International Center, has been used for several years to describe the levels of learning. It takes two scales that measure increasing complexity of student work. First, in the area of thinking, and that uses the long-standing Bloom's taxonomy, and the application model, which was created by the International Center to provide a second dimension of increasing student complexity of work. Taking these two scales, we divide them simply into high and low and end up with four quadrants of learning. Quadrant A is low on the cognition scale and low on the application scale. And Quadrant D is high on both scales. Quadrant B reflects higher degrees of application. Quadrant C reflects higher degrees of knowledge. And some ask about the other forms of the cognitive taxonomy. Because we're simply describing a high and low, you could use Webb's depth of knowledge or more current versions of the knowledge taxonomy to describe levels of learning. So with the framework, we can describe degrees of rigor and relevance, and this becomes a convenient mental model as teachers make decisions about the work that they select for their students, how they facilitate students completing that work, and the kinds of strategies and assessments that they use as part of their teaching and learning within the classroom. Let me explain how this same framework can help you specifically with the 6 shifts required by the Common Core state standards. The first one is about an increase in nonfiction text. That's simply moving toward relevance. More of those nonfiction texts are drawn from the real world, research studies, scientific explanations, technical materials are excellent nonfiction text for students to use. So as teachers strive for relevance in the student work, many of the texts that they're going to select are going to be more nonfiction in nature. The second shift is about content area literacy. And as you more closely examine the Rigor Relevant framework and moving to the right toward increased relevance, there is a band of interdisciplinary. And this points out the connection between interdisciplinary instruction and relevant instruction. To become relevant, you have to become more interdisciplinary. And if you're interdisciplinary, you are moving toward increased relevance. So efforts to select and work on literacy in the content areas is a great interdisciplinary practice, and it moves you to levels B and D on the Rigor Relevant framework. The third shift is about increasing text complexity, and this is about moving vertical on the Rigor Relevant framework. Increasing from low cognition to high cognition, where students are expected to analyze and synthesize, the text should be more complex, both in the structure and vocabulary, also in the tools that are used in literature, and finally in the match of students' interest, that their interests become more sophisticated and select more complex text as they develop. The fourth shift is a focus on more text-based questions, and this is a direct overlap with moving toward Quadrant D instruction. As students are engaged in work that requires a high degree of rigor and relevance, and more of that's going to be informational or non-fiction text, they are going to be expected to draw information from that material in composing their answers and their work. So it's a natural overlap with high rigor, high relevance instructional activities and student work. The fifth shift is on a focus on writing arguments, and this is connected to the previous one about text-based questions, but it reflects higher level thinking skills that students are expected to do in summarizing information from multiple sources in their own words, still anchored in the information that they read. This also has a connection that we talk about Quadrant D learning being creating real-world products. So rather than just engaging in activities within the classroom, this is an expectation that students will be engaged in debates such as presenting an argument before a local commission on environmental issues, or interacting with a school board on school policy, or writing letters to the editor. The more we have students do real-world work in composing their arguments, we are developing high rigor, high relevance. And this is exactly what Shift 5 talks about. The sixth shift is about academic vocabulary, and this is a high-level cognitive activity in certainly students understanding and being able to effectively use vocabulary, but it's also connected with the interdisciplinary literature and getting students to use effectively common academic language across all subjects and moving to higher levels of learning. So this is high rigor and certainly moving into the relevance piece in the band of interdisciplinary. In summary, the 6 shifts give teachers a better understanding of what they need to do differently in order to prepare students for those standards and assessments. But in order to keep all the complex ideas in their mind are difficult for teachers as they're going about their daily facilitating of learning. If they can deeply understand and recognize the mental model of the rigor relevant framework and strive to increase teaching and learning in quadrant D of high rigor, high relevance, they will be naturally taking care of those 6 shifts and preparing students for new standards and new assessments.